Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to read from William Faulkner, Light in August. And I know Faulkner's not the favorite of a lot of people. He was hard for me, too. The first time I tried to read him, I think it was Sound and the Fury, which is probably his most difficult book. And, of course, it just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand it at all. And you know what I finally figured out after I went to grad school and learned how to appreciate just the beauty of language? I realized that you don't have to understand what you're reading. If you just sort of immerse yourself in the language, you feel things. And it's not about understanding, it's not about trying to see what he's doing or understand what he's talking about. It's just appreciating the language and feeling whatever it is that you feel. So Light in August, I think, is one of his more accessible novels. That one and the other one that is way more sort of a standard narrative is As I Lay Dying. So if you're interested in sort of trying him again and seeing if you can appreciate what he does, those two books are probably the best ones to start with. But I love him. He's one of my favorites now. This is from chapter 2 of Light in August. Byron Bunch knows this. It was one Friday morning 3 years ago, and the group of men at work in the planer shed looked up and saw the stranger standing there watching them. They did not know how long he'd been there. He looked like a tramp, yet not like a tramp either. His shoes were dusty and his trousers were soiled too, but they were of decent serge, sharply creased, and his shirt was soiled, but it was a white shirt, and he wore a tie and a stiff-brimmed straw hat that was quite new, cocked at an angle, arrogant and baleful above his still face. He did not look like a professional hobo in his professional rags, but there was something definitely rootless about him, as though no town nor city was his, no street, no walls, no square of earth his home. And that he carried his knowledge with him always as though it were a banner, with a quality ruthless, lonely, and almost proud, as if, as the men said later, he was just down on his luck for a time, and that he didn't intend to stay down on it, and didn't give a damn how much he rose up. He was young, and Byron watched him standing there and looking at the men in sweat-stained overalls with a cigarette on one side of his mouth and his face darkly and contemptuously still, drawn down a little on one side because of the smoke. After a while, he spat the cigarette without touching his hand to it and turned and went on to the mill office while the men in faded and work-soiled overalls looked at his back with a sort of baffled outrage. "We ought to run him through the planer," the foreman said. "Maybe that will take that look off his face." They did not know who he was. None of them had ever seen him before. "Except that's a pretty risky look for a man to wear on his face in public," one said. "He might forget and use it somewhere where somebody won't like it." Then they dismissed him from the talk anyway. They went back to their work among the whirring and grating belts and shafts, but it was not 10 minutes before the mill superintendent entered with the stranger behind him. "Put this man on," the superintendent said to the foreman. "He says he can handle a scoop anyhow. You can put him on the sawdust pile." The others had not stopped work, yet there was not a man in the shed who was not again watching the stranger in his soiled city clothes with his dark, insufferable face and his whole air of cold and quiet contempt. The foreman looked at him briefly, his gaze as cold as the others. "Is he going to do it in them clothes?" "That's his business," the superintendent said. "I'm not hiring his clothes." "Well, whatever he wears suits me if it suits you and him," the foreman said. "All right, mister," he said. "Go down yonder and get a scoop and help them fellows move that sawdust." The newcomer turned without a word. The others watched him go down to the sawdust pile and vanish and reappear with a shovel and go to work. The foreman and the superintendent were talking at the door. They parted and the foreman returned. "His name is Christmas," he said. "His name is what?" One said. "Christmas." "Is he a foreigner?" "Did you ever hear of a white man named Christmas?" the foreman said. "I never heard of nobody at all named it," the other said. Light in August. William Faulkner.